You wake up every day believing that your work should speak for itself, that quality alone will rescue you, that if you just stay quiet and improve, someone will eventually notice. That belief feels noble, it feels safe, and it is quietly destroying your future. Because the world does not reward the best kept secrets. It rewards the best presented value. And if you refuse to sell yourself, life will sell you short. You see, every day you are already selling something. You are selling your ideas, your competence, your character, your ambition, or you are selling your silence. And silence has a terrible price. The tragedy is not that people reject you. The tragedy is that most people never even get the chance to say yes because you never had the courage to ask. And here's the uncomfortable truth most people avoid. Rejection is not the enemy. Invisibility is. Rejection at least means you stepped forward. Invisibility means you stayed small long enough for the world to forget you were ever an option. But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. History doesn't remember the timid. It remembers those who learn to stand tall in their own skin. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago when he wrote that men judge more by the eye than by the hand. Everyone can see, but few can feel. Meaning the appearance of value often opens the door long before value itself is examined. This isn't manipulation. This is human nature. Ignore it and it will ignore you. Selling yourself is not begging for approval. It is not bragging. It is the disciplined act of making your value visible without apology. And the fear you feel when you think about doing that fear is ancient. It's tribal. Once upon a time, rejection meant exile. Exile meant death. Your nervous system still thinks you're risking survival when you risk embarrassment. But the modern world doesn't kill you for rejection. It kills you with regret. The first proven way to sell yourself, even when rejection terrifies you, is to understand this simple law. Confidence is not something you have before action. It is something you earn after exposure. Most people wait to feel ready. The disciplined few act while afraid and let confidence catch up later. Jim Rohn used to say, "Don't wish it were easier, wish you were better." And selling yourself is one of those skills that gets better only through use. The first time you speak up, your voice shakes. The 10th time it steadies. The 100th time it carries weight. Confidence is the residue of survived discomfort. You don't eliminate fear by thinking about it. You eliminate fear by walking through it and discovering that you lived. Each exposure is a vote cast in favor of your own capability. Each attempt rewires your identity from someone who avoids to someone who engages. An identity once changed does not easily revert. But here's the trap. If you tie your self-worth to the outcome, rejection will crush you. That's why the second way is essential. Separate your value from their response. The Stoics mastered this. Epictetus taught that some things are within your control and some things are not. Your effort is yours, your clarity is yours, your courage is yours. The reaction of others belongs to them. When you confuse the two, you hand strangers the authority to define your worth. Rejection is not a verdict on who you are. It is feedback on alignment, timing, or perspective. Sometimes it isn't even that. Sometimes it's simply noise. But when you internalize rejection as a personal failure, you shrink. When you see it as data, you grow. High performers don't avoid rejection, they budget for it. They understand that every no sharpens their message, refines their delivery, and thickens their skin. The amateur asks, "What if they don't like me?" The professional asks, "What can I learn from this response?" And there is something strangely empowering about realizing this. You can be rejected and still be whole, still capable, still dangerous in the best possible way. But there is an even more subtle layer beneath this. Most people fear rejection because they approach selling themselves as a request for validation. That's backwards, which leads to the third way. Shift from proving yourself to offering value. When you enter a room trying to be impressive, you are already weak. Neediness leaks through tone, posture, and pacing. People feel it before they understand it. But when you enter a room asking, "How can I contribute?" the dynamic changes instantly. Jim Rohn often reminded us that value attracts opportunity, not noise, not desperation, value. When you speak about what you can solve, who you can help, and what problems you are equipped to handle, You stop sounding like someone asking for a chance and start sounding like someone offering leverage. The mind that fears rejection is usually obsessed with itself. How do I look? How do I sound? What will they think of me? The mind that sells effectively is outward facing. What do they need? What keeps them awake at night? Where are they stuck? This shift is powerful because it removes you from the emotional center of the transaction. Now, it's not about whether they like you. It's about whether there is a fit. And if there isn't, rejection becomes neutral, even respectful. Two paths that simply didn't align. But there is a deeper psychological advantage here. When you frame yourself as a solution, you stop chasing approval. You start standing on purpose. And purpose is magnetic. Yet even with purpose, many people still hesitate. They know their value, but they don't express it clearly. That brings us to the fourth way. Learn to articulate your value simply, without hiding behind humility. False humility is fear wearing a polite mask. You say things like, I'm not an expert, but, or this might be stupid, but, and then you wonder why people don't take you seriously. Every time you shrink your language, you shrink your perceived authority. This doesn't mean exaggeration, it means precision. It means being able to say calmly and clearly, this is what I do, this is who I help, this is the result I produce. No drama, no apology. The world is full of capable people who never learn to put words to their competence, and unspoken value might as well not exist. Language is the bridge between your potential and other people's perception. Think about history's influencers, philosophers, leaders, builders. They didn't whisper their convictions. Marcus Aurelius didn't hide his discipline. Machiavelli didn't soften his observations. They spoke plainly about hard truths, and people leaned in. When you articulate your value, you give others permission to see you clearly, and clarity reduces rejection. Confusion creates it. But here's the paradox most people miss. Even when you do everything right, rejection will still happen, which is why the fifth way is the most important of all. Build a personal philosophy that is bigger than approval. If your identity depends on being accepted, you will always play it safe. Safe ideas, safe words, safe ambitions, and safe lives rarely feel meaningful. Jim Rohn warned us that we must all suffer one of two pains, the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. Rejection is a form of discipline. Avoidance is the seed of regret. When you decide what you stand for, when you define your principles and standards, you stop negotiating with fear. You understand that some doors must close for the right ones to open. You understand that not everyone is supposed to understand you. And that is not a flaw, that is a filter. The strongest individuals in history were not universally liked. They were internally aligned. They chose self-respect over applause. And because of that, their presence carried weight. Rejection loses its sting when you realize this. It often means you had the courage to be specific, and specificity repels the wrong people while attracting the right ones. But there is an even more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. If you never learn to sell yourself, someone less capable but more confident will decide your future for you. Promotions, partnerships, opportunities do not go to the most deserving. They go to the most visible. And invisibility is not a moral high ground. It is a strategic error. You don't rise to the level of your talent, you rise to the level of your self-expression. Selling yourself is not about ego. It is about responsibility. Responsibility to your potential. Responsibility to the people who could benefit from your work but will never find you if you stay silent. So the next time fear tightens your chest and tells you to stay quiet, remember this. Fear is not a warning. It is an invitation. An invitation to grow larger than the version of yourself that needed safety more than significance. Speak before you feel ready. Offer value before you feel worthy. Stand firm even when your voice shakes. Rejection will not break you. Avoidance will. And one day, if you practice this long enough, you will realize something quietly powerful. You were never afraid of rejection. You were afraid of discovering how strong you could become once you stopped running from it. You are not afraid of rejection. You are afraid of being seen clearly and realizing you were capable all along. And once you see that, once that realization settles in, something inside you shifts permanently. You stop asking, "What if they reject me?" And you start asking a far more dangerous question. What if I never test what I'm capable of? That question doesn't let you sleep comfortably anymore, because now you understand that selling yourself is not an event, it's a posture, a way of moving through the world, a quiet decision you make every morning about whether you will participate in your own life or merely observe it from a safe distance. Most people observe, they wait for permission, they wait for confidence, they wait for certainty, and while they wait, years disappear. Opportunities move on to braver hands. And they call it bad luck when it was really bad positioning. Jim Rohn warned us about this kind of slow erosion. He said life doesn't get better by chance, it gets better by change. And the change that matters most here is internal. The moment you decide that rejection is no longer a personal insult but a professional cost. Because everything worthwhile has a cost. Think about it, you don't expect to build muscle without resistance. You don't expect wealth without risk. But somehow, when it comes to self-expression, you expect a painless path. No tension, no pushback, no awkward moments. That expectation is not innocence. It's entitlement. And life has a way of humbling entitlement. The people who sell themselves effectively understand something subtle about human psychology. People don't respond to perfection. They respond to conviction. When you speak with certainty, even imperfect ideas sound compelling. When you speak with doubt, even brilliant ideas fall flat. This is why fear of rejection is so destructive. It leaks uncertainty into your delivery. You start qualifying your statements, softening your edges, diluting your message so no one can disagree. And when no one disagrees, no one commits. There's an old principle in persuasion: if you don't polarize, you don't mobilize. Safe messages create polite nods. Clear messages create movement. But there is a deeper layer most people never confront. Rejection often hurts not because someone said no, but because their no confirms a private doubt you never challenged, a story you've been telling yourself quietly for years. I'm not enough. I'm not ready. I'm not the type of person this works for. Selling yourself forces those stories into the light, and once exposed, they either dissolve or demand proof. Either way, you grow. This is why avoiding rejection feels comfortable but costs you your edge. Comfort preserves the story, discomfort interrogates it, and here's where the disciplined few separate themselves completely. They rehearse rejection in advance. Not emotionally, but strategically. They ask themselves, what's the worst realistic outcome? Not the dramatic fantasy your fear invents, but the sober truth. Someone says no, someone doesn't respond. Someone isn't interested. And then what? You remain alive, your skills remain intact, your future remains unwritten. When you strip rejection of its exaggerated consequences, it loses its authority over you. This is not bravado, this is clarity. And clarity creates calm. Calm allows you to listen instead of perform, to adjust instead of retreat, to stay present instead of disappearing internally the moment resistance appears. Most people crumble at the first sign of disinterest because they mistake it for failure. But seasoned operators know that disinterest is often the opening move, not the final verdict. People test confidence unconsciously. They want to see if you believe in your value when they don't immediately affirm it. That moment is critical. If you collapse, they lead. If you stay grounded, they lean in. This is why selling yourself is less about words and more about posture, your tone, your pacing, your willingness to pause instead of rush. Silence, when used intentionally, communicates strength. Desperation fills silence. Confidence uses it. But there is a dangerous misunderstanding here that needs to be corrected. Selling yourself does not mean forcing yourself on people who are uninterested. That is insecurity disguised as ambition. Real self-selling is selective. It respects time. It respects context. And most importantly, it respects itself. You don't chase every door. You knock on the ones aligned with your standards. Standards are what protect you from becoming reactive, from bending yourself into shapes that aren't sustainable just to be accepted. Without standards, rejection feels catastrophic because you have nothing solid to stand on. With standards, rejection is simply information. Jim Rohn often spoke about becoming a person of value. not for applause, but for alignment. When your internal standards rise, external rejection matters less because you're no longer auditioning for identity. You're offering contribution. And contribution is powerful because it shifts the relationship. Instead of please choose me, the energy becomes here's what I bring, decide if it fits. That subtle difference changes everything. People sense it. They may not articulate it, but they feel when someone is grounded versus grasping. And grounded people are trusted. Grasping people are avoided. But let's go even deeper, because this is where fear truly dissolves. At some point, you realize that rejection is not always about you. In fact, most of the time, it has almost nothing to do with you. People reject based on timing, mood, priorities, pressure, fear of their own, and constraints you will never see. When you personalize every rejection, you give yourself far too much credit. You assume you were the central variable. You weren't. You were one factor among many. This realization is humbling in the best way. It removes the spotlight you've been standing under in your own mind. And once the spotlight dims, performance anxiety fades with it. Now you can show up as yourself instead of as a character desperately trying to be approved. And that authenticity, paradoxically, sells better than any script. There's a reason Jim Rohn's words still resonate decades later. He wasn't trying to impress. He was trying to clarify. He spoke with calm certainty, not urgency. He trusted that those who were ready would listen, and those who weren't wouldn't. No resentment, no chasing. That is mastery. Mastery understands that rejection is part of the sorting process. It refines the path instead of blocking it. But there is one final truth that ties everything together. And this is the one most people never want to hear. If you don't sell yourself, you force the world to guess your value. And the world is terrible at guessing. It defaults to the loudest signal, not the truest one. So every time you stay silent, every time you hide behind "I'm just being humble," every time you wait to be discovered, you are making a decision. You are deciding to let randomness play a larger role in your life than intention. And randomness is a brutal strategist. The disciplined life is not loud, but it is deliberate. It understands that fear will never disappear before action. Action comes first. Courage follows. Confidence arrives last. This is the order, not the one we want, the one that works. So start where you are, speak with what you know, offer what you can, learn from every response, adjust, refine, repeat. Not because you need approval, but because your potential deserves expression. One day, sooner than you expect, you will look back and realize rejection stopped being a threat the moment you stopped negotiating with it. The moment you decided that a meaningful life costs discomfort and you were finally willing to pay.